Well, a very good morning once again. Thanks for staying with us. We are live on Daybreak. We want to get into that big discussion at this time. Now, of course, you know the big story from yesterday. The National Secretariat for the Building Bridges Initiative, BBI, has postponed the launch of signature collection, citing the delayed publication of the Constitutional Amendment Bill 2020. Now, in that memo, the co-chairperson said the team will not be able to launch the exercise as had been planned earlier. Why? But also, what are some of those contentious issues still around the BBI that you would want to have, that we have that discussion on? That's what we want to get into at this time. Joining me in studio in a very socially distanced setup is Honorable Otiende Amolo on my left, Member of Parliament for Rarieda, together with Honorable Boni Halwale, former Senator Kakamega. Thank you to the both of you for coming into studio. But also joining me virtually, we have Kimani Wamatangi, the Senator, Kiambu County, and also Beatrice Elachi, former Speaker, Nairobi. To each of you, thank you so much for finding time for this. And let me straight begin with Kimani Wamatangi, Senator, Kiambu County, and just hear from you on this. What are we to make of the delay in the launch of signature collection? There are different views being peddled out there. We know the Joint Secretary of the BBI, Paul Mwangi, tweeted yesterday, "Ignore all narratives. How BBI signature launch postponement was caused by search for consensus. Sounds politically exciting news, but not true." While Kipchumba Murkomen, Elgeyo Marakwet Senator, says, "I congratulate the president for against all odds postponing this process. This is a president I knew. Let's now have meaningful engagement for win-win result." Those are their views. Those are their thoughts. For you, Senator, what are your thoughts? Kimani Wamatangi, if you can hear me.
Yes, I do hear you. Can you hear me, Wahiga?
Okay, let's try and fix your sound, but let me bring in Otiende, who's here with us in studio. Otiende, let's start with you on that one as we figure out what's happening with Kimani Wamatangi.
Thank you, Maura, for having me here. I think that's an idle discussion. It's an idle discussion because it's neither here nor there. On a matter such as a constitutional amendment and collection of signatures by popular initiative, a postponement of the launch and speculating on the reasons is idle. All I can say is, one, that it was already confirmed, and it is true that there are bound to be technical, editorial, rectifications that would be done. Because so far, as long as the draft has not been published, it is just a proposal. Once it is published and the commencement of signatures, begins, then it cannot be changed. It's on its way to a referendum. Secondly, the point is that any postponement can only be really, really temporary and brief, because time is of the essence. You must realize, and I think Kenyans must realize, that we are actually less than 2 years to the next election. And in good prudence, ordinarily, you want to effect changes at least a minimum of 2 years to the election. So time is really of essence, and I'm quite sure that the postponement is very temporary. And I mean, in a few days or so, we will, recommence the process.
And on that same note, you actually tweeted yesterday asking Kenyans to take a look at what's happening in other parts of the region and telling them that if we're not careful, you almost said we could find ourselves there if we don't look at a process like this. I want to give you a chance to explain that, because it's caused quite some reaction out there from Kenyans.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
Sometimes when people talk about the BBI, talk about the handshake and vilify the president and the prime minister for the handshake and what they're doing, they forget that less than 3 years ago, we were on the precipice of disintegration. Less than 3 years ago, as of 30th January 2018, we had a situation where there was an election that we had in August 2017. It was contested successfully in court, and I was one of the lawyers. There was a repeat election, which was boycotted by at least half the country. The president, therefore, was sworn in with a legitimate mandate of like half the country. And we went on and swore in our own president in Uhuru Park. And we had a situation where we were already talking about demarcating this country into two. We were actually on the brink of collapse as a country. If the president, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, and the prime minister, Raila Amolo Odinga, did not do that handshake, I think right now we would be speculating whether we have a country. So it must be understood that that handshake was a cessation of hostilities, and it was a cessation of what could have led us to a very dangerous area. Many of the countries around us now are in turmoil, and yet they're in turmoil with lesser issues than what we had. The intention of the handshake and the intention of the BBI process is so that when we come to elections in 2022, no matter who wins and no matter who loses, we do not have a situation where we go that way.
Okay.
But there's always a danger we still could.
Let me bring in Boni Halwale on the same. And Senator, for you, Otiende Amolo has said idle discussion, there's no need to delve too much into it. But in politics, they say the devil is in the details. You know, those are signature collection process meant to begin today. It hasn't. In your view, is it a non-issue? And I want to give you a chance to respond to what Otiende has had to say as well.
It's a big issue, and because of who he is, I'm sure viewers right now are confused. They said, Amolo Otiende is speaking, or is somebody else? I want to assure them that he's very close to me. In fact, I just pinched him. We didn't shake hands, and I confirmed that someone. Let me tell you.
Okay, hang on one second. I'm told we have a challenge with your microphone. Hold that thought briefly, and we'll fix that for you. Honorable Halwale, I know you are saying you did not greet Otiende, you pinched him. We'll pick it up from there shortly as we sort that microphone. Honorable Beatrice Elachi, you're on the line. I want to get your reaction on this as well. When you look at the front page of the Standard, Honorable Elachi, Uhuru meets Ruto as BBI signature drive called off. I want to get your thoughts on this at this time. Where is the BBI process at, in your view?
Thank you very much, Wahiga. First of all, I just want to say that to thank the team that is running the process because, one, I think they have run this process for the first time in a manner where people catch up with them, which is good, because then you don't bring in a lot of propaganda, as now the way we just want to start a lot of propaganda. And the most important thing is that the launch has to be there, just as the way my senior has said, that we must launch when we have the draft. And I think as we were even engaging with the team, yes, we know the draft was not ready yet. And so therefore, to bring in, it is because the president has met so many people, and so you cannot say who and who has made this. For us, we are consistent to understand that, first of all, the signatures are going on, by the way. The team is there, they are out there. And so things are working in an approach that is multitask approach. And by the time maybe we will be coming to sign, you will be so shocked when they are telling you, we are signing and we are signing and these are the signatures. So you'll be so shocked. And therefore, the team is not, in terms of thinking how the team has decided to use a time frame that will not bring in also any legal questioning. And therefore, they have to run with that time. And so Wahiga, I know, even as the women, we know very well that, one, the draft was not ready. Two, we know it's a draft that Kenyans are going to embrace and to feel, yes, now we are moving on the same direction. I think the most important thing we should be now asking ourselves is that let us assure the draft that comes out is a draft that will be carrying Kenyans and their inspirations. I think that's the most important thing.
Okay, let me also bring in Senator Matangi on this. Senator, I trust you can hear me before I come back to Senator Halwale here. Senator Matangi, there are still those who say a win-win result is possible, and they say that's not there yet as per the way the process is being handled. Let me get... Okay, my goodness, I'm not having any luck today. Senator Matangi, I hope I'll be able to catch you a bit later on. Senator Halwale, I think we're now good with your sound. Immediately after you mentioned that you did not shake hands with Honorable Amolo, you can now carry on from where you left off.
Yes, I was just confirming to the people that it is the good old Member of Parliament of Rarieda. It's not a stranger. But Honorable, you need to be advised that amending the Constitution is not a pregnancy. It is a pregnancy we know that once conceived, at the end of 9 months, you must be ready for delivery. What is this hurry about changing the Constitution? Supposing the Constitution was not changed until 2052, what clause is there that would make Kenya to collapse. So the issue of timelines, let's not use them. Let us look at the postponement of yesterday as momentous. Momentous to the extent that critical stakeholders have taken divergent views. And therefore, now, instead of Junet, Honorable Junet, purporting to attribute the postponement to failure to publish the bill, let's stop that kind of diplo speak. Let us speak to it. The postponement is as a result of consultations between the two leaders of the Republic, the Deputy President and his boss. That let us create room for consensus. There's nothing wrong. If, Honorable Amolo, you are satisfied, for example, that you, as a legal practitioner, you are happy with the executive having a prefect in the midst of the judiciary, then you are happy with it, let other lawyers also ventilate. That's all the constitution, the consultations are going to bring. And from my corner, I also have my issues as far as the constitution is trying to handle the medical practitioners' interests, as far as the Health Workers Commission is concerned. The clergy have their own users. As farmers, we have got our own users. Let us sort out those issues through a discussion. This attempt for you to tell people that the country was on the brink of collapse, it is because you are not in the boiler room. If it was Orengo saying, if it was Modama saying, if it was Miguna saying, or Dr. Boni Khalwale saying, together with the other four principles that we were on the brink of collapse, I would believe it. Because we know there was no such a thing. In fact, the make-believe you saw at Uhuru Park, which we boycotted, it is because we all agreed, other than Raila Odinga, that it was an illegality. It was something which was unconstitutional. There's nothing like the country was going to collapse. In fact, the reason why you're confident the way you are, my brother, is because President Uhuru refused to apply the law. If he had applied the law, he would have arrested Raila Odinga for taking an illegal, unconstitutional oath.
I think he let him immediately respond. Go ahead, Honorable Molo.
You cannot fathom the workings of providence. Immediately, Dr. Boni Khalwale started talking about having pinched me. His microphone went off because he was lying. You know, Kenyans must know with this corona, I would not allow anyone to pinch me. We only did an namaste at a safe distance. So if someone here, Dr. Boni Khalwale, has COVID, please do not suspect that I also have it on that account. But more seriously, Maura, you know, Dr. Boni Khalwale is in a very interesting position. For the last 1.5 years, we have discussed the BBI process with Dr. Boni Khalwale. Him and his newfound team have consistently opposed the idea of BBI. Forget about the product of BBI. And even in more recent times, they have declared that they'll be opposing it. So if you are opposed to the document, what does it matter to you when it is launched? You know, why should it matter? In any event, the idea of a launch of collection of signatures is not a legal or constitutional requirement. It is merely a political statement. You do not need to launch it. Once the draft is ready and you've collected the 1 million signatures, that's when the legal process begins by submitting it to IBC. So the launch is for those who support the document. Those who do not support, like Dr. Boni Khalwale, it should not matter to them because you're opposed anyway. You should just wait until that document comes to the referendum, then now you can stand and oppose it. Secondly, you know, sometimes change in political philosophy and groupings can do wonders. When I look at Dr. Boni Khalwale, actually, I barely recognize him. I barely recognize my brother here. Knowing Dr. Boni Khalwale and his role in NASA at the time, except that when the ultimate prize was to be paid, That is the question of going to Uhuru Park to swear in Raila as a president, then him and those of his thinking then cowardly pulled out. It did not stop the swearing-in process. It did not stop the hundreds of thousands of Kenyans who came there. And so it's not a question of saying where you are, what insider. It is a question of being there at the time. And anyone who was in this country at that time knows we were on the brink of collapse. Anyone who's genuine, whether you support the president or not, whether you support Raila or not, knows that if it was not for the handshake, we would be in a very bad place. Now, Dr. Boni Halwale then goes to start throwing in things which I'm quite happy to discuss, like the question of the judiciary ombudsman, because they keep throwing things that are false narrative which are not in the draft.
And I'm going to interrupt you because we're actually going to get to that, because we want to discuss some of the controversies around the document, but I still believe we have Beatrice Lachi. Not at the moment. Okay, you know what? Let's delve into it at this time. We seem to have a problem getting them on camera at this time, and we'll bring them in shortly. The controversies around this document, and Otiende, I'll give you first take at this, and whether this postponement of the launch could give a chance for either better explanation of some of those controversies or amending where possible, even though you've talked about a technical editorial rectification. Again, we could talk about those definitions. For example, the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops, this is what they raised. They were concerned about an expanded executive, creating an imperial presidency. They were concerned about a bloated parliament. They were concerned about what seems to be the politicization of the IEBC. They were concerned about the Kenya Police Council. Could it compromise the independence of the police? I've had many others concerned about a prefect, quote unquote, under the executive, guiding and maybe even putting in place a judiciary that, for all intents and purposes, is an equal arm of government. Let's start from those controversies, for example. Tiende, I'll give you first take at it before I bring in Halwale.
Thank you, Maura. Actually, there are many issues, and I'm quite happy to take them one by one, because there's been a lot of disinformation around that. Let me start perhaps with two or three. Okay. Just three first. Okay. Let us actually start with what Dr. Boni Halwale raised, the question of the judiciary ombudsman. And there's the talk that the idea of the judiciary ombudsman is actually an erosion of the independence of the judiciary. Nothing could be further from the truth. I'm the first ombudsman of this republic. And as the ombudsman of the republic, I discovered that there were a lot of complaints that were being raised in respect of the judiciary. And as the ombudsman, I would raise the complaints, including with some judges specifically. You would find there are instances of 2 judgments that have been written, or delay of judgment, or allegations of corruption, or misplaced files, and all sorts of things. So I approached the then Chief Justice, who was Dr. William Mutunga, and suggested that you may need an individual within the judiciary to serve as an ombudsman internally. And then we would work together. And he appointed an ombudsman, who was then Mr. Bidali, who was then a senior magistrate, to work as the ombudsman. Later, Justice Maraga determined that they needed an ombudsman who was of a higher level. And as we speak, the judiciary ombudsman internally appointed is the Deputy Chief Justice. The idea of the BBI is to move it from an administrative measure to a constitutional measure, and to a constitutional measure of a person with standing. And therefore, the idea is, and it's consistent with many other appointments, that the president would nominate a person. That person is then brought to parliament for parliament to determine their suitability. Only if parliament agrees, then that person is appointed the judiciary ombudsman. Now, let us start from there. There are most offices right now are nominated to parliament. Some by the president, some by bodies like the Judicial Service Commission, some by an appointing panel. The important thing is, it is parliament that vets. That is what happens even with the DPP, the Auditor General, the Controller of Budget. So there is nothing unique in terms of the president suggesting a name. That does not erode the independence of the judiciary. Second, once that person is appointed, the judiciary ombudsman's role is to investigate and make recommendations. By the way, the idea of making recommendations is a lower level. The ombudsman of this republic, who right now is Honorable Kajoju, by the time I was ombudsman, I was able to persuade, and it is now established law, that the findings of the ombudsman are binding. It's like a court decision. But the Judiciary Ombudsman findings are a recommendation. To whom are those recommendations made? The Judiciary Ombudsman in this BBI makes the recommendations to the Chief Justice. So he's subservient to the Chief Justice. You cannot therefore say that the idea of the Ombudsman erodes the independence of the judiciary when it's up to the Chief Justice as the head of the judiciary to act. Thirdly, the Ombudsman then is required to sit in the Judicial Service Commission. Why? Because the Judicial Service Commission is the disciplinary organ of the judiciary. If you have somebody who's investigating the judiciary, you need that person to sit in the disciplinary organ.
Okay.
But the Judiciary Ombudsman is only one of several members of the Judicial Service Commission.
Okay.
So he cannot or she cannot override the Chief Justice. So there's absolutely no point and in absolutely no way in which it erodes the independence of the judiciary.
I want to ask you to hold there because I need to get a quick reaction from him. We take that break, so we bring in our other two guests. So hold on the other 2 points. I know I promised you that. Let me get a reaction from you before we take that break.
I think this is the time for me to report to Kenyans about the wrath I faced from Honorable Amolo Otiende when he was the Ombudsman and I was the Chairman of Public Accounts. This Member of Parliament,
who you said is your friend?
Yes, he wrote me a letter warning me and giving me timelines in which to report to him why, while I was investigating the corruption around the printing of new currency by the Central Bank of Kenya, and why, after I had lost the motion in Parliament, why I raised, quote unquote, disparaging remarks against certain individuals in the Republic. Him. And I refused to go to his office. So if you create such a man in the judiciary, I can assure you this man will be writing the judgment. This man will be making sure that if your term is not as the powers that be would wish, the term is reviewed. If indeed the explanation that my brother is giving Kenyans is true, then it is all the more reason why we should allow the Chief Justice to be the one appointing the Ombudsman and not the executive. When you allow the executive to participate in administration of justice, sir, what you are doing is you are creating a breach between the executive and the judiciary, which the executive will use to interfere with dispensation of justice. Honorable Amolo Otiende, I ask you, you know the doctrine of separation of powers. How do you convince a student of law at the University of Nairobi that by the president appointing an ombudsman into the judiciary, then the judiciary would be independent from the president? You have a duty, a professional duty, a social duty to this republic that you stand up to your party leadership and tell them that they are privileged to have you, and therefore you are advising them against abuse of the principle of separation of powers.
Okay. Okay, hold it there. I'm going to give you a chance. Let's take that break. We're still trying to bring in, we need to bring in Senator Matangi and Beatrice Alachi as well, get their thoughts on this. Honorable Amolo, I'll give you a right of reply, I promise you that. Let's take that break. We'll be back shortly. There's so much to discuss. We're only discussing even just one issue, so much more to go into. And what are your questions? 22422 is our SMS line. Hashtag is Daybreak. We'll be right back.